Dear learner, this is the next units of the block 2, that is capitalisms and freedoms. Here I try to make some kind of relationship between the capitalisms and freedoms. Let's start the new slides. That means कि when we're talking about the capitalisms and freedoms is a concept that examine the relationship between the economic system of capitalisms and the idea of individuals' freedoms. This relationship has been deeply explored by the various thinkers, especially economists and political theorists. One of the most influential work on the topics is Milton's Friedman's of the 1962 books titled Capitalisms and Freedoms, which argue that capitalism is the most conducive systems for promoting and maintaining freedoms, particularly individuals and political freedoms. However, the relationship between the capitalist and freedoms has been a subject of much debate, with both proponents and the critics offering different view on whether capitalism enhance or undermine the freedoms. These are the important things. Capitalism is an economic system that is characterized by the private ownership of the means of production, factory, land, capital, etc. Free markets where goods and services are traded based on supply and demands. Profit motives where individuals and companies operate to maximize the profits. Limited government interventions, often described as laissez-faire capitalism, how in the practice, and some government regulations typically exist. Capitalisms rely on voluntary exchange in the marketplace, where prices are determined by the competitions and resources are allocated through the decisions of individuals and the businesses. Next is that is the freedoms in the context of capitalisms. Freedom in the context refer to individuals' autonomy, self-determinations, and ability to make choice without undue external interventions. The concepts of freedoms can be broken down into economic freedoms, political freedoms, and personal freedoms. Here, first freedom that is going to the details, that is the economic freedoms. When we're talking about the economic freedoms, means the freedoms to engage in economic activity without excessive regulations or control from the governments. It include the right to own property, start business, choose where to work, and engage in voluntary exchange in the markets. Second view of the economic freedoms that according to the Friedman's economic freedom is necessary conditions for political and personal freedoms. A capitalist markets allow individuals to make choice about what to buy and where to work and how to invest, and thus promoting personal autonomy and opportunity. Milton Friedman argued that this dispersions of economic powers in capitalist systems where many individuals actors make decisions, prevent centralized control, and thus promote freedoms. Examples: in a capitalist systems, individuals have the freedom to choose their professions, invest in the stock market, start business, and own private property. The government's role is limited to enforcing the contracts and protecting the property rights. This is the important part. Next is that is the political freedoms. Political freedom refer to the ability of individuals to participate in political process such as voting, running for the office, or expressing uh, dissents without fear of repressions. Proponents view Friedman's and others advocates of capitalism argue that economic freedoms is a precursor to political freedoms. A free market system allows for a decentralized distribution of wealth and power, which prevent the governments or any single entity from becoming too powerful. Capitalism provide a checks on political authority by ensuring that wealth is not concentrated solely in the hands of the state, as the case in more centralized or societal economics. Linked to democracy, Friedman argued that capitalism create the conditions for a functioning democracy by promoting pluralisms and competitions, both economically and politically. When individuals have economic freedoms, they are less dependent on the state, and this independence fosters are robust civil society and democracy. Next, talking about the personal freedoms, that is, personal freedom refer to the ability of individuals to make decisions about their own lives without interference from the others, including the state. Proven's view, capitalism is seen as a system that allows peoples to express themselves through the choice they make in the marketplace. Since people have more control over the economic resources, they can pursue their the personal goals, interests, and self-expressions without being constrained by external authority. Now come to the Milton Friedman's arguments in capitalisms and freedoms. Milton Friedman's book Capitalism and Freedoms is perhaps the most influential modern defense of the relationship between capitalism and freedom. In the books, Friedman outlines his belief that economics and political freedoms are interdependent and capitalism is essential to preservations of the both. The role of economic freedoms, foundational role, the Friedmans argue that economic freedoms is a foundational to all other freedoms without the ability to control one economic life by choosing where to work and want to buy and how to save the invest. Other freedoms such as political and personal freedoms are undermined. Economic freedoms allow individuals to reduce their dependency on the state on other powerful groups, thus increasing their autonomy. Second is last one, that is private property and personal autonomy. He emphasized the importance of private property as a key component of both economic and personal freedoms. By owning property, individuals gain a form of control over their own lives that is not dependent on governments, grants, or control. Now come to the next thing, that is the relationship between capitalism and political freedoms. Decentralizations of power. Friedman asserts that capitalism's decentralized economic powers, making it harder for a political power to become concentrated in their hands of few. In non-capitalist system, especially central planned economy, the government control both political and economic lives, leading to a totalitarianism. Economic independence, capitalist gives individual the ability to be economically independent of the governments, which is critical for maintaining political freedoms. If people are economically dependent upon the state of their livelihood, their political choices may be constrained and dissent may be punished. Historical examples. Friedman uses historical examples such as the contrast between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War to demonstrate how capitalism fosters freedoms while central planned economy strives it. He argued that countries with capitalist economics are more likely to be politically free and democratically. Next is talking about the role of the governments. That means in the capitalisms and freedoms, limited governments. Friedman's advocate for a limited role for the government, arguing that the state should be focused on protecting property rights, enforcing contracts, and maintaining a stable currency. He is a skeptical of the government interventions in the economy, such as regulations, welfare programs, and central plannings, which he believes infringe on economic freedoms and lead to inefficiency. Dangers of government controls. Friedman argued that whenever the government expands its control over the economics, it is inevitable encroachments on individuals' freedoms. For example, excessive regulations or high taxes reduce individuals' freedom to choose how to spend their money or run their businesses. He also criticized policy like price controls, which he believes distort the market and reduce the freedoms. Next thing about the I think that the critics of the relationship between the capitalisms and freedoms. While propagandists like the Friedmans argue that capitalisms and freedoms are inseparable, critics offer several challenges to this view. Capitalism can lead to inequality, economic inequality, and freedoms. Critics argue that capitalism often lead to significant economic inequality, which undermine freedoms for and the poor and disadvantaged. In capitalist system, those without wealth or resources may find themselves with limited opportunity and unable to fully exercise their freedoms. Concentrations, that is, concentrations of wealth and power, while capitalism is supposed to decentralize powers, critics argue that it often leads to the concentrations of wealth in the hands of a few, resulting in powerful corporations or wealthy individuals having disproportional influence over politics, the economic, and society. Thus, economic dominance can undermine political equality and democratic participations. Exploitations and alienations. Marxist critics Karl Marx argued that capitalism inherently alienates workers from and their fellow workers and their own humanity. According to Marx, true freedoms can only be achieved when individuals are not exploited by the capitalist employers and when the means of production are critically owned. Wage and slavery methods. Some critics argue that capitalism forces individuals to sell their labors in order to survive, which limits their freedoms. For example, workers in the low wage jobs with few protections may be economically free in a formal sense but lack real freedoms due to their dependence on the exploitative employee. Now come to the consumerisms and false freedoms. Critics like Harvard Marcus in his work One Dimensional Man argue that capitalism creates a form of false freedoms by turning individuals into consumers rather than citizens. Under capitalism, people may feel free because they can buy many different products, but their desires are shaped by the advertisings and corporate interest, leading to superficial choice that do not reflect real freedoms. Commodifications of life. Capitalism, according to some critics, commodifications every aspects of life, reducing human relationship, cultures, and natures to marketable goods. This emphasis on the profits and markets exchange, they argue, undermines deeper forms of the human flourishings and the freedoms. Now come to the contemporary discussions, capitalism, freedoms, and neoliberalisms. In the late 20th and early 20th century, neoliberalisms and economic philosophy that advocate for the free markets, privatizations, deregulations, and limited government interventions. Because dominance in global economics, neoliberalism is largely influenced by the thinkers like Friedrich Hayek and Milton Friedman, further interviewing the concept of the capitalism and freedoms. Globalizations and capitalist freedoms. Globalization has spread capitalist market around the world, often accompanied by the promises of increased freedoms, both economics and political. Free trade agreements often markets and the expansions of the global financial systems are often seen by the some as a way to promote the freedoms on the global scales. Critics of neoliberalism, however, neoliberalism policy have also been criticized for creating vast inequality, eroding labor rights, and allowing multinational corporations to dominate global market. Critics argue that neoliberal capitalism undermines real freedoms for workers and developing countries by subjecting them to those forces of global capitals with the little protections of autonomy. Role of a state and capitalism today. In the modern capitalist society, there is ongoing debate about the proper balance between markets, freedoms, and government interventions. Proponents of societal social democracy argue that for regulated capitalisms, where a state play a strong role in ensuring social welfare and reducing inequality, while maintaining market dynamics, examples including the Scandinavian country, which combine capitalist economics with a strong social safety nets and protections of the workers. Now come to the conclusions that is ambiguous relationship between capitalism and freedoms. The relationship between capitalism and freedom is complex and contested, while proponents like the Milton Friedman argue that capitalism is the best system for promoting individuals and political freedoms. Critics point to this say way in which capitalism can lead to the inequality, exploitations, and dominations by the wealthy. The ongoing debates about the role of markets, the estates, and freedom in society reflect the enduring tensions between those concepts and their implications for the modern life. These are the important discussions on the capitalisms and estate. Thank you. Thanks for listening these lectures. Thank you very much.